I'm going to go back to a little film here.
Okay.
Touch of Evil.
Okay.
Orson Welles.
Yeah.
One of the best, most beautiful scenes I saw in that whole movie was this part where Charlton Heston playing a Mexican is imperfection in itself, which is beautiful.
Yes.
But Charlton Heston on the phone in a storefront talking to Janet Leigh, and the whole time there's this little Mexican kid in front of this blind Mexican kid with like a cup, just in the scene, you know. Sergio Leone was great at that too. He would slip in, you know, something like the guy with that's shorty with no legs on the board with the weights, you know. They're beautiful. They're beautiful because it's life. Life is not perfect. You're going to see things, you know. I mean, you look at these Hollywood movies, everything's clean. Everybody's wearing brand new clothes. Everybody's clean cut. That's not life. We're getting back to real and not real again.
Yeah.
Life is imperfect. Life is beautiful because of those imperfections. I see a flaw, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that flaw. I'm too fat. It's okay. I'm not smart enough. It's all right. You know?
Yeah.
And that's what I like to find in my art as an actor, and in my art, you know, when I'm painting or writing, because without these imperfections in life would be lifeless, because everybody would be perfect. I think that Vonnegut had some short stories, and one was about the handicapper general, where everybody had to be equal. So he would make the perfect not so perfect, and the not so perfect more perfect, so everybody would be perfect. Do we want a society like that? No. That's why everybody's got to accept the fact that we all have our flaws. We're all human.
I was reading a poem the other day about these two poets, and they were giving a poetry reading. One of the poets was very, very highly respected, and it's like the audience came there to listen to him.
Yeah.
But there was a second poet on the schedule, and he wrote about the experience. He said, up in Northern California, he stood at the podium, and he'd been reading for some time.
Yeah.
He'd been reading poems about the nature and the goodness of humans. He knew that everything was all right. You couldn't blame him. He was a professor. He'd never been in jail. He'd never been in the whorehouse. He'd never had his car die in a traffic jam. He never needed more than 3 drinks during his most depressed evening. He'd never been rolled. He'd never been flogged. He'd never been mugged. He'd never been bitten by a dog. He was kind, unmarked, and tender. His wife had never betrayed him. His luck had never betrayed him. Anyway, he said, well, I'm just going to read 3 more poems, and then I'm going to let the other poem come up here, the other poet. And the people in the audience said, oh, no, please read some more. Read 1 more poem. And he said, nope, this will be the last poem. And they cried out even louder, please, read some more. But he was good to his word. He read his poem, and then he stepped down, and I got up to read. And all the people wiggled in their seats, and some of them hissed. And some of them made remarks to me, which I will use at some later date in a poem. 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a letter from him saying that he did enjoy my reading. He was a true gentleman. I was in bed in my underwear. I had a 3-day hangover. I took the letter and folded it into a paper airplane like I used to do in grammar school, and it sailed about the room before landing between one of my old racing forms and a pair of my used shorts. We have not corresponded since. The celebration of the imperfect.
Yeah, the celebration of the imperfect. It is something that is definitely overlooked. But I think that it's also a well-kept secret in a lot of ways. Because those pieces of art, those poems, those films, those songs, I think when having that element of celebrating the imperfect will make it all that much better of a thing, of a piece of art.
Do you try to bring your life experiences when you're creating a character? Do you try to bring those into the character?
Always. It's a definitely a recall. I don't think that anything I do is original. I think everything that I do is something that I've seen, that I've concocted in my own mind and come back out as being something else, but using the elements of other things. I think every artist does that. I don't think that anybody can come in and really tell me that they're doing something original that is never done before in human history.
Yeah, I've encountered that with people, the whole concept of the original.
Yeah.
In other words, it seems like there are people who insist that, take for example, there's somebody wrote to me and yelled at me about this. I said, there's a quote by Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel at all times, but only when absolutely necessary, use words.
Nice.
And somebody wrote to me and said, it's disputed whether or not he really said that, or whether or not one of his followers made that up and attributed it to him. So you should stop telling people that he said that. See the whole, like the perfection thing. It has, like you're talking about originality, it has to exactly be the case that he said it. Yes. You have to be very precise and define everything. And it happened on Facebook, too. I mentioned something that Plutarch said, that in any society where you have a huge income inequality, you are destined to have other social problems. And someone said, I can't find any evidence that Plutarch actually said that. So
where would they start? Where would they start to look? I mean, the dead scrolls. I'm not really sure. I mean, where do they go? I mean, there were no copyright laws back then.
Exactly.
But if it was attributed to someone, even if it was like, or through translation, lost through translation over the years of some people who study. I can understand where they're coming from there. But on the other hand, it's good wisdom. Whoever said it, it's good wisdom. I think I heard one. It was anonymous the other day. It was that I'm sick of being told to get over the election by people who can't get over the Civil War.
Wow, that's good.
Is that a good one? I thought it was. I thought it was genius. These type of things are out there that who in the hell knows who said it? But if it's good wisdom. But when you were talking about that, though, about the poet, brings me back to Siddhartha. Siddhartha was a prince. He was in a palace. He was never allowed to see the misery of the world. And the first moment that he saw the misery of the world, of death and disease, was the beginning of his journey for enlightenment. And he walked away from his family, from his comfy home to find the enlightenment, going through all the different stages of the Hindu beliefs and beyond. But I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, maybe that's where wisdom lies, is in the perfections of the world. Maybe it does lie within the dirty streets of Chicago or New York. It's hard to say. I mean, some people think it's on the mountains of the Himalayas. Some people think it's in Peru. It could be anywhere. It could be right inside your own skull. there's only one way to find perfection, and it's through imperfection, I think. I mean, that's kind of a crazy concept.
Yes, it is.
From a little Catholic boy from Buffalo, New York. But, I think about religion a lot. And
do you think that you will continue on in some fashion after your death? That you have some essence?
I think we all do. I'm spiritual as much more than I am religious. And I hope it's more than just becoming elements in the universe. But if it does, it does. But then, it is what it is. But I like to think that our spirit goes somewhere.
Because there's two schools of thought that go all the way back to ancient Greece.
Yep.
Aristotle said the essence of a thing is inside the thing. The essence of a plant is in the plant.
Yep.
When the plant dies, the essence is gone. Plato said the essence of a thing is outside of it.
Yep.
So when the thing dies, that essence just keeps going on.
Yep.
Which of those two schools would you tend to side with?
I would go with Plato.
Oh.
I would definitely be
Yeah,
Plato.
most people go with one or the other.
And getting back to who said what.
Yeah.
Socrates never wrote. He thought that writing was not a good thing because it entraps the thought forever. Mm-hmm. Plato was, on the other hand, writing. So it could have been Plato said both things. I mean, who's to argue? I mean, who's going to say, no, it was Socrates because he never wrote it down? And the Socrates, I mean, they did the same thing. They probably had all sorts of good thoughts, but they never wrote it down. That's all. The Africans never wrote down a lot of their history either. I mean, it was all word of mouth. And I mean, it's a hard way to hold on to your history by not putting it in some kind of archive or library. But I think that there's got to be truth in whatever it is. It doesn't matter who said it, as long as there's wisdom in it. But I just I made that connection though when you were talking about the poet that never and he said all these things about all the things that you can live till 90 years old and never live a day. Or you can live till you're 50 and live the best life adventures and whatever. That was, I think something that Rose Kennedy said I'm talking about the Kennedys, but I'm just saying that it was something she said about her sons when someone in an interview had mentioned something about how sad she must be that her sons were murdered. And she said, well, my sons live longer and better lives than most 90-year-olds that I know today. And was she right? I think so. So I think that, fill it well. Fill your life well because, do what you love, be happy, respect other people, and don't get so caught up in being perfect because you'll be a happier person that way. That's the perfection that you're looking for.
Recently, somebody pointed out to me an artist named Lucio Fontana. Have you ever heard of this painter?
No, I haven't.
He takes a canvas.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll paint it, say, light blue.
Yeah.
Nice color blue. Then he takes a very sharp knife and he makes like 5 slits in it. And then he presents that for sale.
Okay.
It made me wonder, what are the limits as to something being artistic and something being laughable? Are there any, in your opinion?
I don't like to belittle anybody else's effort, if there is an effort. True intent, heart, I think has a lot to do with it. I mean, I look at a lot of Pollock's work, which was dribbling.
Yeah.
And I kind of say the same thing. I mean,
that he might have crossed this boundary line where he went beyond the limit of art.
Yeah, it's also in the eye of the beholder, I guess, too. I mean, obviously, someone thought it was good because now they're going for millions upon millions. Maybe it's the name. Maybe it's. But then I look at an artist like Basquiat, who was all heart. I mean, that was all raw, emotional. I mean, that's what Warhol saw and what he was doing in comparison to the very controlled art that Warhol was doing. So I think that contrast between the two brought the two together. That those opposites attracted, and I think it was a lot to do with passion, the passion for the art. I think you can tell when an artist's heart is in it in comparison to when the heart isn't in it, and it's just, I mean, you can say that about movie stars or actors or painters just by, I guess, the persona of the art and possibly even the artist. So, without saying one is good, one is bad, I think the artists themselves has to look into their own heart and say, is this really what I want to do, and am I having fun doing it? Because if they're not having fun and they don't like what they're doing, then they're probably not a very good artist. I think that has a lot to do with the talent. You got to love what you're doing. I've seen a lot of people who are skilled, but I think skill and talent are two different things, because talent is actually working that skill, or you just can be skilled and not really care about it, and so you're not really talented. So, I mean, what kind of artist are you if you don't use that skill? So you're not very talented. I don't know. I think that's my own definition of talent in comparison to maybe other people's. Well, he's really talented because he can draw. But does he draw? Not often.
I was talking to somebody recently about the subject of looking at yourself in old pictures. You might recall that for many of the images that Greg is using in the movie, he's using old pictures.
Yes.
And now, do you ever look at an old picture of yourself and say, that is not me? In other words, I am so different now that the person in that picture and me are like, whew.
Like it was another lifetime away.
Yeah. Like I'm wondering if there is a time period, like pictures, say, from 10 years ago, you might say, yeah, I'm pretty much still that same person. But from like 20 years ago, you say, no, that's not really me anymore. Do you have such a buffer between the different selves that you've had?
I think so. I mean, because I think we all do. Because, I mean, it's like, only if I knew then what I know now. I think that's where that saying comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everybody kind of does. You want to go back to that kid, that angry kid, or that stupid kid, and slap him in the head. But, I mean, I think that the essence of myself has always stuck.
That's been continuous.
That's been continuous. I have very similar dreams to what I had many years ago. I've kind of always been that way. I never really, to the chagrin of many of my relationships, never really changed for anybody.
Has anyone ever tried to change you?
Oh, absolutely. I think every relationship, someone tries to change someone else.
And do you think that was like unjust that they tried to change you, or were they doing the right thing?
I think for them it was a natural progress of trying to have control of the situation so that it's more conducive to their own lifestyle. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out all that well, you know.
That's a question I've asked myself many times.
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship with somebody and you sense that they're trying to control and change you so you're more compatible with the person they want you to be, is that a signal to you that you should pull back?
It usually is, but then there's the, the self-doubt starts creeping into your head, and all right, should I continue this because, there's someone there that, I think a lot of it comes down to sexual contact or whatever, that, you're going to go without if you're not going to do what they want you to do. And I guess everybody goes through that argument in their own head, but then there's those that are like, well, this is just how I am, and you're just going to take me for what I am, and I think I took that road in a lot of ways. I tried to go down the other road, but I just couldn't see it happening. Just couldn't see it happening. I thought less of myself for letting it happen if it did happen, and I think I, once again, pull the reins, rethink, all right, now what are we going to do, and it usually ended the relationship because, they wanted that, and if they didn't have it, then it was, the deal was off. But those are the type of things that you got to go through, and those are learning curves, I think, looking at old photographs, and you think about, well, I haven't even gone through that yet, that relationship yet, so what the hell was I thinking, but, I think the best relationship, is probably having a kid, that's probably because you get to nurture. That's just the father in me, I think. And I thought that was pretty cool, and it's a very different type of relationship than any relationship that I ever had in my life.
Are you sometimes called upon to give your wisdom on some matter?
No. No, you don't want to. Yeah. That's. I mean, how many things did you listen to your dad? I mean, me too. I mean, we're all guilty of it. I mean, as a parent, you get frustrated because your kid doesn't listen to you. But she did okay up to now, and she's done it pretty much on her own. So I'll give her advice, and I'll try my hardest to help her out in any way I can. But I don't want anybody to learn from my mistake. I want them to make their own. I really do. Or I want my daughter to make her own mistakes so she can learn from her own mistakes. Because her mistakes probably won't even be anywhere near what my mistakes were.
That's very interesting you should say that. When I was a child, my father came downstairs, and I had taken apart an old record player. Yeah. And I was young, man. I was probably 8, 9 years old. I'd taken apart an old record player that it had a bad hum in it. And I figured, I got to figure out where this hum is coming from. It's driving me crazy. It's so loud. So I took it apart. I plugged the record player in, and I had a screwdriver, and I was touching different things to see if it would take the hum out. Maybe if I connect these two, it'll take the hum out. Maybe I could. So my father comes downstairs, and he sees me, right? And he goes, "You aware that that's plugged in?" I go, "Yeah, I'm trying to get the hum out." And now a lot of parents would have freaked out.
Yeah.
And my father said, "Just be careful you don't electrocute yourself." And then he walked away. I thought that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Because it was dangerous. There's no question about it. And he saw it was dangerous, but he thought like you. He thought, if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're not going to learn.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he was definitely concerned.
Yeah.
Which is definitely understandable, because that could kill you. Absolutely. It's like taking a fan and put it in your bathtub, you don't want to do that either. But, I'm talking about just life mistakes. I mean, perfect example. my daughter needed an inspection sticker for her car. Mm-hmm. She took it to a Monroe muffler place. Mm-hmm. The Monroe muffler guy takes her sticker off because, of course, it's overdue. And then comes back to her and says, well, it's going to be $800 for us to get your car inspected. So now she's stuck at the Monroe dealer, and it was something that probably could have been fixed at home for, a fraction of the cost. And they're now charging her $800 to do it. I'm just saying, using Monroe, they're not actually the place I was, but you know what I mean, one of those chain type repair shops.
Right. In other words, they put her in a position where she couldn't say no, and then they gave her
they do
the
it all the
price.
time. They do, especially with young ladies. They do it all the time. And even men. Anybody young and stupid enough to actually bring it to them for an inspection sticker gets caught in this thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, there's a life lesson for you. She didn't ask anybody. I could have easily gotten her the inspection sticker for $10. So she had to pay the $600. I helped her with some of it, but it was like, this is a life lesson. But that's what I'm talking about. Those type of things they got to learn as being young adults. They're going to run into these things that and hopefully they learn from it. It's like touching the hot stove, and it's always the kid that has to keep touching the hot stove. That's the one you got to worry about. The one that burns himself the first time and all right, I'll never do that again. It's the one that keeps. Yeah, I might have been that guy. My daughter's not that though.
Is your life headed in a particular direction, or is the future like totally unknown to you?
For the first time in my life, being at the age I'm at, I think I'm trying to guide it in a certain way, but I have no idea. Everything is uncertain. I think a lot of people in this country are feeling that way right now. It's I was very young when it happened, but I remember the Nixon years right around
Watergate
when it was kind of the same way.
Everything seemed to be disintegrating.
In a way, yeah. Because I think it also, because I was brought up in such a politically charged family. Everything about it was political. Dad was always,
In other words, it wasn't taboo to discuss politics.
No. It was encouraged.
Yeah.
It was encouraged, and I think that because of that, I remember these things. I remember the whole trial, the resignation, and the anger my old man had for Richard Nixon for the whole time since '68. And I was 3 years old when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and the sadness, the immense sadness in my household when that happened. And then Nixon getting into office and being in there for so long, and the war continuing on, and having two brothers in Vietnam, and just that whole world just being stressed to the limit. And I kind of feel that way again, in a way. Now, I don't have people at war right now, but I still feel for my young nephews and nieces and their lives now, and having my daughter having gone through the recession and having to strive for what she's got now. Their lives are not better than our lives, and I think that's the first time in American history that's kind of happened, that the kids don't have better lives than the parents' lives. And my life wasn't as good as my parents' life, because they had an opportunity that was presented to them after the war. Dad was in Korea in World War II, and their lives, they came home, they started a huge family, during the war, and continued. and we're able to like support that family, and everybody was successful in my family. All went through high school, and